Even though we didn't go viral, I will make videos that should help. This one will be about things that cost me time but not money. But I have ADHD, so if you want me to keep making videos like this, I need you to follow, repost, comment so that I get that hit of dopamine so that I don't lose interest and start talking about things like that cool rock I found outside. Here is my disclaimer. I can give some general advice, especially because I wrote a YA fantasy, but without looking at your book specifically with a marketing eye and scouring it for things like quotes that might resonate with readers, the graphics that I would use if I were you, who your audience is, and the angles that you would take depending on those audiences. The advice I give might be stuff that you've already tried, and you might say, well, I knew all that, I did all of that, and it doesn't work. I wish marketing was foolproof, but it isn't. I'm not doing brand new marketing tactics that other people haven't tried. I did things that specifically worked for me. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, is that hopefully by saying some of the things that I'm going to say, you find the things that specifically will work for you. So let's rewind a little bit to the video I did make and then go forward from there. As KRS points out, yes, some of the things on that list are hard for indie authors to do. And that's because that list is representative of what a trad pub author might get from their publisher, depending on what their marketing team wants to invest in their book, and if these things work for their book's age, genre, and other defining categories. For example, I am Asian, so what kind of things do I want to reach out to during AAPI month or Filipino Heritage Month? One of the reasons someone might go trad is because as an indie, whether you are fully self-pubbed or whether you are with an indie publisher, is that we know that these spaces don't want to work with indies, even if they have the money to spend. So as an indie, we have to reach out to spaces that will hold space for us and do a lot of things ourselves. And some of that is about persistence, as in we send emails to booksellers, librarians, schools, influencers, and we don't stop. And then other times it's about being so persistent that we get lucky, like me sharing all of my successes on social media and then somebody thinking that that is newsworthy and putting it on the news. Or when I made a video about Outkrate and then I asked them to feature me as an author and they did. I can't tell you that making one video will get you that opportunity, but if you're generally making videos and you're tagging these outlets, you might get an opportunity, but you got to be willing to fail a lot. And I think as authors, we're built to hear the word no a lot. One of the things that made my journey so successful is that I had so much self-awareness of who I am and what I was saying in my book, and I was able to be so niche about that. But there's a marketing mindset and experience that I come with because I used to make TV commercials in Houston and I used to work with advertisers in Corpus Christi. I have experience. That's not easy to teach, but that doesn't mean that you have to have a whole degree to have that kind of same self-awareness about you and your book. It just might take a little bit of work, and it might take a little bit of asking other people who have read your book if you're hitting the mark. I knew my audience, and I knew that I wasn't pitching my book to everyone because it wasn't for everyone. Yes, I want everyone to read it, but not everyone was going to, and I had to be okay with it. Niching down was actually to my benefit. I was pitching the mental health spaces because I wrote a book about trying to heal after abuse. I looked at Mental Health Awareness Month. I'd looked for blogs in the past that had done author interviews on these kinds of books or featured lists with these kind of books, influencers who did these kind of posts because there are people who are specifically book people in the mental health space. I am Asian American, so that meant looking at AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, which is in May, and seeing what events happened during that time, who the influencers were who pitched books like that. Same thing for Filipino Heritage Month. Also, I was pitching to people who are mixed race because I am biracial, and so are a lot of my protagonists in a lot of my stories. Even if I only had one coming out, that is something that was always present in my books. So if they found me for one book and liked it, they were going to like future books. So it can be hard to give general advice to YA fantasy because even though I wrote a YA fantasy, the attack plan for my book was so specific to me. If you're aware of your book's marketability like that, then the advice I give might make a lot of sense to you. So if I just say to you, hey, reach out to bloggers, podcasters, influencers, and you do that for YA fantasy and it's not working, it might be because it is so broad, because YA and YA fantasy is such a saturated space. By the way, not you specifically, KRS. You might be doing so fantastic. I don't know. The general you as in the person I'm talking to in this video. So if you get really niche about who your audiences actually are, then when you pitch to those places, your chances of getting yeses become a lot higher. So then some of you might say, yes, I know all of that. So what else? You know, those coveted exclusive book cover reveals and articles that come out about the author on really cool entertainment spaces like BuzzFeed Books and those really coveted book lists, like 10 books you should read if you love mermaids. If you know your audience really well, you could be the one writing those articles and then pitching to those spaces like this. BuzzFeed actually wrote an entire article about how you can write the content and submit it to them, and they might actually publish it. So if you know your book is Filipino American, you could be writing a list of 10 Filipino American books that you should be reading and then submit it for Filipino Heritage Month. Then you're on one of those coveted lists. If you wrote a mermaid book, you could compile a list of 15 mermaid books that people should be reading during May, which is in May. Other advice I would give that would cost time but not money is to reach out to communities you previously belonged to. I wrote a YA fantasy and I got really lucky that a friend I went to high school with works at our old high school, and she reached out to me, but I could have reached out to her. She reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do an interview for the high school newspaper. Absolutely, I do. That is my exact audience. Not just because they were in the young adult age, but because I was writing about my experience in high school set in that same town, set in that same area, set in that same school, but renamed. The university that I got my master's in also did an interview of me. Then they wrote a press release from that article and submitted it to all of their local spaces, but also all of my local spaces because I don't live in the same space that that university is in. And my local newspaper picked that story up and submitted it to like my small town and this small town that's like an hour away. These are communities that I previously belonged to that were willing to embrace me. And these are things that cost me my time, but not my money. Now, there are things that I did that cost me money, but I looked at them as investments in me. And some of those things did pay off, and some of those things did not pay off. But the things that did pay off did make up for the money that I didn't make. And I view it all as a learning experience of things I would try again and things I would not try again. But that's a video for another time. So if you don't want me to lose interest because we are fighting my ADHD brain here, make sure you follow, repost, comment. Otherwise, I will start showing you my rocks. They're good rocks. Mwah.